Everyone wants to know someone who hosts an event. Everyone wants to know someone who brings people together. And everyone wants to get invited to a party. So it's a really easy way to create a connection and to keep moving.
Hello, and welcome to Holistic Ambition, where we talk with visionary leaders who are redefining what it means to be successful. We cover ways you can live with more well-being, meaning, and fun in your career, business, and relationships. I'm your host, Stephanie Thoma, career coach for ambitious professionals and author of Confident Introvert. Today, we have Nick Gray with us. Nick is an entrepreneur and best-selling author living in Austin, Texas. He started and sold 2 successful companies, Flight Display Systems and Museum Hack. Nick is the author of the 2-Hour Cocktail Party, a step-by-step handbook that teaches you how to build big relationships by hosting small gatherings. Over 75,000 people have watched his TEDx talk about why he hates most museums. He's been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and New York Magazine called him a host of culturally significant parties. So let's just dive right in here. What is a culturally significant party to you?
Such a unique phrase. At the time, a lot of up-and-comers or influencers or celebrities were attending my events. And that is why I think they were called culturally significant. They were like a happening. It was a hot thing to go to.
Yeah, okay. And I know it's all subjective around like what is culturally significant. Sometimes it becomes clearer as time goes on. So I imagine, or actually I'm curious, when you started your parties, were they a hot spot for celebrities and everyone to come, or did it start out a little bit slower than that? I know in your book, you talk about how anyone can host a party. So I'm curious about what the beginnings were like.
Oh my God, so much slower. It was just friends I met at college, people I met at Whole Foods or at other parties. And to be honest, I still like hosting those types of gatherings. And it's what I encourage most people to host is a simple get together for the acquaintances or new connections that you want in your life.
Totally. Yeah. And, you have this audacious goal that you're getting pretty close to achieving in your book, specifically with this call to action for people to implement the practices of the 2-hour cocktail party. And I myself, I adapted it for a 2-hour tea party in my own apartment here in Austin, Texas. And yeah, you wanted to. So I'm curious about this goal and how it came about of having 500 hosts. And now I believe you're at 400 and something. Can you tell us about how that goal came about and how you're going to be like leveraging that?
Yeah, I'm at 444 as of today. I love that you adapted it, by the way, for a tea party. That's what I did for my very first gathering in New York City. I'd come home from a trip to India and I had all these Darjeeling teas. I love tea. And I used that as an excuse to open them up and brew tea for my friends because I don't drink alcohol. So I said, oh yeah, let's do that. I want to encourage people to host happy hours and get-togethers and gatherings and create more relationships. And I think we need more small house parties. We need more connections. We're going through something of a friendship recession now, where as we get older, it gets harder to make new friends. And it's when we need those connections more than ever. So I'm pretty passionate about getting 500 people to host their first event using name tags and introductions and kind of this party operating system that I developed that are, frankly, you did it. There's simple stuff. This isn't rocket science. It's very common sense advice, but I just found nobody had written it down or really shared it in one place before.
I love how tactical and step-by-step it is, to the point where if there ever was a question of, but wait, like, what do I do if someone shows up early? What do I like? It's so regimented that you literally can just set a timer on your phone and you're like, okay, this is the time for the first breakout, second breakout, third. And I also appreciated how you emphasize ending on time so that people respect you more as a host. And before we dive into the logistical pieces of your parties, something you brought up was around not drinking alcohol and how I guess now you host cocktail parties. I had Amanda Kuda, another local author in Austin, on the show a few weeks ago. And I'm curious about yeah, making the distinction between parties that are sort of like ragers or parties that are more sort of cocktail parties, more established. And I wonder if this can kind of vary by age group. Can you kind of break that piece down for us?
One thing that's unique about my formula is that simply by hosting it on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night and setting a 2-hour time limit, it really puts the party in the mindset for people that this isn't a rager, blackout, crazy alcohol type party. Those are usually reserved for like maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. And so I think the Tuesday, Wednesday night, I say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in my book, but increasingly I'm thinking, probably Tuesday, Wednesday are nicer. When was yours? Was it on a Monday?
It was actually on a Monday. Typically, I wouldn't do a Monday because I think, oh, people are just getting into the
Yeah.
swing of the week. But, people were excited to attend. And, at first I did do a smaller number. I thought, oh, because if people are going to sit down for tea, I think I can comfortably sit 9 people. But then I just ramped it up and we had around a dozen of us total.
Nice.
And people ended up giving feedback when we were in the final circle. I was like, hey, does anyone feel like shouting out something that worked really well tonight or that didn't? and one person said, the number of people is perfect. And I
Good
was
job,
like,
Stephanie.
thank you. Yeah. And, I think another point here that we could even bring up is, so I used to live in San Francisco and I would host a variety of different types of personal development events, professional development. And I personally have found, I've been in Austin, Texas for 10 months now, that there's been sort of a learning curve with a different sort of, climate and culture socially. So you being from New York, transitioning to Austin, Texas, and anyone who's watching this, who's maybe moving states, what sort of advice would you give to them? And what helped you acclimate to a new city in adulthood?
Moving cities can be really intimidating, especially around the idea of who you're going to meet and build your network. And with remote work and people being not in an office, where that's usually where people make friends, the real high point for most people when they meet the most number of people and make the most new friends, it's in college or in university or when they start a new job. And now it can be harder. The advice that I would have is, it sounds like I'm selling my book, but it's to learn to host events. And I'll tell you why. When I moved from New York to Austin, I had the opportunity to test my playbook myself and to learn that if I put myself in social situations, I'd meet new people, but I wanted a way to bring those people into my life that wasn't meeting up for tons of one-on-one coffees or dinners. So I started to host events. Now I did a lot. I ended up doing about one a month. And I did that for 4 or 5 months. And I met so many people, many of which are my very good friends still today. I think everyone wants to know someone who hosts an event. Everyone wants to know someone who brings people together. And everyone wants to get invited to a party. So it's a really easy way to create a connection and to keep moving.
Yeah, and I'm curious, let's say that there is some buzz around the event, and you typically recommend inviting 15 people, but what if there comes a point where there are 25 people, 30 people, and people begin to want to attend every month or every other month, but maybe there just isn't capacity? How do you handle that?
One phrase that I say for my events, I say, wow, I'm getting all these interesting people together here in Austin. There's new people every time. And I try to invite a mix of old and new people. And that helps set the expectation that it's not the same group every single time. I think by also having your next event planned or on the calendar, it helps you to have something else to invite somebody to. So if they feel left out that they weren't invited to one and you do want to see them again, then you have another event in the future, even if it's 6 weeks out, that you can invite them to.
See, I love that as well, because typically, other event playbooks, or maybe just in my own head, what worked out for me previously was usually 2 weeks in advance. So I used to host only 2 weeks out. 1 week, I would be like, no way, that's way too intense. But 6 weeks, there's a lot of breathing room. And then let's say, even if you're out in the world meeting new people and someone's interesting, you can say, hey, next week, I think I have space for one more person if you'd like to attend this get together that I'm having. So there's a great amount of flexibility there, especially with having 2 events on the calendar at once. And yeah, it's just it's something that I wanted to bring up as well is, in this epidemic of loneliness. There's so many buzzwords, so many different ways to talk about it. When it comes to having acquaintances versus closer friends through the context or lens of these gatherings, and I'll just interject before I finish my question, that I invited people to my tea party who, let's say those acquaintances where you had a really great conversation at an event, and then you say, oh, we should get together, and then it just doesn't work out. Then and you're like, how is this not working out? Because we vibe so much. Then a number of those people where we just never met up one-on-one for coffee or whatever, they actually came to my tea party. So we got to connect again and have that other touch point. And, as they were leaving, they're like, please invite me to the next one. And then that's when next time I could be like, hey, oh yeah, I have a mix every time. So, in the next coming months, I'm definitely going to send you an invite. So yeah, but back to the question of friends and acquaintances, how do you recommend people go about making sure that you do have a thriving inner circle and don't necessarily succumb to being this public figure that ultimately is not super connected?
I love that you use the party for exactly that right purpose, which is to reconnect with acquaintances who maybe you once had an amazing conversation with, and you both wanted in that moment to meet up, see each other again, get coffee, get dinner, but it's so hard to schedule and things come up and people are busy. But a cocktail party or a tea party is such an easy thing for people to pop into. And my advice is that in those moments, in next time you host, if you want to see somebody again and you really want to create that connection, to then at the party about an hour in or an hour and a half in, pull them aside and say, hey, Darren, I would really like to kind of connect. I'm so happy you came tonight. I've been so busy tonight. Can I call you tomorrow and let's schedule something, or even do it right then, like on your phone? Be like, do you want to get coffee or you want to get dinner sometime? My advice, and most of the work that I do, helps people to create that wide network of acquaintances and loose connections through hosting this party. And I tell them, if you want to develop your connections deeper and better, then yes, that's the time to plan a dinner, to schedule a one-on-one coffee, to do something more intimate. But a lot of my work really, and my best advice, is just around building that network of acquaintances and keeping kind of a connection of warm contacts in your personal life even, right? Because I think that's so important.
Yeah, really all connections that you make in a way is, quote unquote, networking, right? We live in a society where people have jobs, people have companies. It's kind of how it goes. But I love that. You're emphasizing also seizing the moment where you have people in real time. What's the point in this digital day and age? I guess people maybe make a mental note. They're like, oh yeah, maybe after the party, maybe 3 days later, I'll play it cool and send this message. It's like, no, they're here right now. Be excited. They want to be here too, or else like, why would they come?
Yes.
So, and something else that you touched on so briefly in the book that I wanted to go into is, being kind of quirky. I will raise my hand. I know that I'm kind of quirky, and how sometimes, it works, sometimes it falls flat. I'd like to hear from you around how, let's say that someone who identifies as being like not totally, has some social quirks, like how can they make those work for them?
Make the social quirks work for you?
Yes.
I think setting expectations is really helpful. That's a good question. I spoke to a guy in Houston, Texas. He's a screenwriter. He's a professor. And he said, look, I can speak in front of a class of students, but it's very hard for me to just wing it. And the idea of making small talk and hosting an event is very hard for me. He said, I really appreciated that in your book, I could just read the scripts. I literally could just set the waypoints and know exactly what to say. And even though for him, that was a little quirky and weird, he said, at least I did it. And now I've built a community. He's since hosted like 4 events for screenwriters in Houston. And he said, I'm so glad I at least did it instead of I didn't do it. Letting people know there's other sort of quirky things. I mentioned a guy named Saul in Toronto in the book, and he likes to start his events at a weird time, like 7:52, or he'll finish them at like, 9:03. And he embraces that. I find that as long as people know what to expect and you can tell them early and tell them in advance, for example, the quirky things at my events, that there's name tags, that we do a round of introductions. People will buy into that quirkiness when you tell them in advance, when it's part of the invitation, when it's part of the RSVP page, when it's in the reminder messages. It's okay. They're buying in. I think instead what people just don't like is they don't like surprises. Or some people. Folks love good surprises, but they don't like unknown surprises.
Yeah. Wow. And that's some food for thought, right? Where sometimes you think, oh, I don't want anyone to worry about it. They're my guest. When really, by setting the stage, people have an opportunity to, they walk in and they go to the name tags versus walking
Yes.
right by. And I will say, in my experience, because I actually had not hosted an event where I live with name tags before. I had hosted venues with name tags, but then it was kind of a code switch for people where it's like, wait, there's a dozen of us and you want us to wear name tags? And I was like, yeah, you just make it normal. You're wearing your name tag when they show up.
Yes.
And people ultimately liked it. At one point we had like two, I want to say like two Allisons next to each other. And then, she introduced herself and, since I'm the only Allison in the room and, everyone laughed and just, kind of being lighthearted with it and letting people know that this is ultimately to help you because remembering names, that's actually such an underrated skill of remembering people's names. And I'm curious when it comes to your dream job as a kid. I know we're kind of switching gears a little bit here, but did you anticipate doing anything similar to what you're doing now? Or was this more of like an adult dream that came to life?
Wow. When I was little as a kid, I think my dream job was to have my own baseball card shop or comic book store. I loved comic books and baseball cards and the commerce of it, the trading, the entrepreneurship of building up a collection. And I love the idea of being a business owner and having my own thing. Today, I don't have a baseball card shop or a comic book shop, but I do kind of do my own thing. And so I guess it's like kind of related. I'm hosting people in my home. Yeah, I think that's how I think about that.
Well, and okay, since you bring up entrepreneurship, I would be remiss to not bring up the two companies, that you at one point in time had, and I believe you sold both of them, right? So
Yeah.
Flight Display Systems and Museum Hack. So my understanding of Museum Hack is that you essentially had another system. It sounds like you're very system driven, where
Yeah.
you identified, okay, this is how to give an amazing museum tour with all the quirky little things that maybe standard tours did glossed over or totally neglected. And can you tell us about Flight Display Systems and the process of like cultivating those things and selling them through an entrepreneurial lens?
Museum Hack was so funny. It started out as a hobby, as a true passion project, a business that I just did. I never wanted it to be a business, but I hosted people at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, similarly on a 2-hour adventure that had a lot of structure. And I really built that structure out of what I had learned from hosting hundreds of events. I think it's one of the reasons why I believe in the power of teaching people to host their own events, because it had so many benefits for me, both building my network and then creating a company out of it that ultimately became somewhat successful. On that business, it was just me. I was giving these tours of this museum that I loved, and it became very popular and people seemed to like it. And I got to hire other tour guides to give these non-traditional museum experiences, because I think museums are boring, especially art museums. They're like super boring. And so we would just have fun adventures. That business grew a lot when we pivoted, and not pivoted, but we just focused a little more on our team building sales to businesses and organizations. And I sold that company in 2019. The other business that you mentioned called Flight Display Systems, I helped grow that company. And it was actually a family business my father was working on in the basement of our home. And I helped them hire their first employees, do a lot of the marketing, and take the image from a bit more of like a homegrown thing to a larger business and think about how we really grew the company. I thought I'd just help out for a couple of months, but that turned into a few fantastic years. And then we sold that company in 2014.
That's awesome. Gaining extra credibility with the fam there. And,
Totally. Oh my
just
gosh. It brought us like way closer together as well.
that's so awesome because you hear about, families doing business. It can go any which way. So I'm very glad that went super well for you.
It-
And when it comes to, let's say, staying informed of all of the different trends that are happening in your industry, and when it comes to thought leadership, certainly having a book, certainly having that call to action of, hey, like do this with me, 500 plus people. What are other ways that you maintain your thought leadership?
I really have to force myself to get out and go to new events and go outside of my comfort zone. This past week, I think I went to 3 new events. And I'm going to tell you, Stephanie, before each event, even me, I was coming up with all these reasons that I should cancel.
Mm.
Oh, I don't have to go to this. I'm tired. Let me just take a night off. Oh, I'm not going to meet somebody. Oh, it's far away. Oh, traffic. Oh, parking, whatever. Each one of those events, I'm so happy that I went to it ultimately because I got to meet new people. So for me, the way that I stay plugged into the thought leadership is just getting out, going to events, asking people questions. It is one of my favorite questions to ask people, especially like high profile people or people who do a lot, is I say, hey, who runs the best events that you've been to? Like the best that are just on point that you would recommend 10 out of 10 to your like peer plus friends. So I like hearing and keeping my finger on the pulse that way.
Yeah, when it comes to attending events, I mean, that's something, certainly hosting is great, but being in the circuit of going to things is such a great way to not only attend events and enjoy the experience, but meet other people who are hosts, which kind of brings us to another topic of collaborations and, with your peers or, can you tell us about, let's say, any events that you've co-hosted as a result of meeting someone out in the wild or any sorts of ways that you have leveraged or had something come from these connections that you've made at events?
There's a new one that I'm working on now that I'm really excited about. That's with a celebrity chef and a best-selling author who has 10 million subscribers on social. He lives here in Austin. And I happened to invite him to one of my big events. It was a referral from a friend. And he came to my event. And I think I said at that event or shortly thereafter, I said, hey, let's co-host. Let me help you host something. I know that you have this house and you want to host. Let me run the logistics and let me help you host it. It'll benefit me because I get to meet a bunch of new interesting people, and it'll benefit you because I'm good at this. You've seen me be good at this, and you'll just be able to host an event for all your friends. So it's kind of a win-win for both people. I'm working on that. It should happen in February.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. So it sounds like, yeah, just in real time. And the chef thing, it's kind of random, but it's like, hey, it sounds like you go where energy flows, right? If it's fun,
Yeah.
if you're meeting these random people, and on that vein, do you believe in serendipity? Do you believe that some things are, meant to be on the course of your life path, career path?
I mean, I've had so many random encounters and situations that I, I believe in serendipity. How do you define serendipity? When you say, do you believe in serendipity? What do you mean?
Well, okay. So a better way to phrase that would probably be, how some things are serendipitous and you're like, oh, that's interesting how those things aligned,
Uh-huh.
how the butterfly effect, even how I had to meet that person to then meet that person to then have that door open. So this is getting a little bit philosophical, but yeah, just curious about your perspective of, do you believe in coincidences, or do you believe that everything is happening for a certain reason? And if you do believe that, then maybe what do you think is contributing to you and other people sort of being on that path that is meant for them?
One thing that a friend of mine said that I still think about, she said, any person has the potential to change your life. You just don't know who. And I think about many years ago, I was hosting a museum tour, and someone attended that tour as a guest who later invited me to speak during the lunch hour of a new conference that he was hosting. That speech got put online. That speech was then seen by a TEDx organizer, which got me put on the big stage. There were just like all these little things that had to happen for this big outcome. And I think about all the people that I know in these random connections that, yeah, I believe that by having a larger network of acquaintances, by
Mm.
you hosting that tea party, for example, you're going to be top of mind among all these people now because you hosted them and they're thinking of you. And when we can increase our surface area for serendipity, more great things will happen.
That is potent right there. That serendipity is like, yeah, they happen, but being able to set the stage for it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We get lucky the more chances we give ourselves to get lucky. And so that phrase, oh, shucks, it was just dumb luck. I believe in helping let there be more chances to get lucky, and that'll help you get lucky more often.
Yeah. And, and it's empowering, right? To not just think, oh, life's happening to me. Like this great thing happened. Cool. This not so great thing happened. Oh gosh, wish I could do something about it. It's like, no, like this comes down to proactively creating your life. And also, what you brought up, your friend saying that anyone has the potential to change your life. And just to even go a little bit more deeply into that, I believe that intuitively, sometimes we have illogical pulls to like, oh, this person, maybe you're at an event and you're like, I want to invite them to my party, when maybe they're even a student and you're like, I don't know what they're going to become, but I like the vibe. And then you just never know, and whether it becomes something or not, there's just such a synergy in, having this curious, open demeanor. So I love that you're sort of encouraging other people to take that on. And so I'm curious if there are any things, let's say that someone who is a new host, established host, are there any things that you think that people should be aware of, any common faux pas that can be easily alleviated or averted that are top of mind?
One of the easiest things I find is people who do not collect RSVPs. And they just do the spray and pray method, where they share out the details and they pray that people will show up. And I think that in collecting RSVPs, you ask your guests to just do a little bit, to just RSVP, to just make a commitment that they're going to come. So much of my work involves boosting the attendance rate for people, because I found with working over 400 people for their first party that as long as they can fill the room, then they're going to have a successful event. And so it's the collecting RSVPs, giving yourself enough party runway, like you and I talked about, minimum 2 weeks notice before you host an event, and then not hosting it on socially competitive nights. I think Thursday, Friday, Saturday are tough nights to host an event. They're socially competitive. That means you're more likely for people not to be able to come or to cancel or no show because you get bumped for something else. Those are some of the easiest things that can help make a party to kind of take it from good to great.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for those tips. And, I wanted us to kind of circle back a little bit to what we started talking about before we wrap up. So as we begin to wrap up, I'm curious, in a word, in a phrase, how do you define ambition?
When people work on the things that they're truly passionate and obsessed about, when they want to do the crazy stuff, when they want to do more, that for me is ambition.
And what does holistic ambition mean to you?
Holistic ambition to me means working on the things you want to work on, when you want to work on them, with the people you want to work with.
Yes, having that sense of agency. And, how can people stay connected with you, learn more about you, get your book?
The name of my book is The 2-Hour Cocktail Party. It's on Audible, on Amazon, on Kindle, anywhere books are sold online. And I'm very active on social media. So I'm at Nick Gray News, NickGrayNews, on all the social medias.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Nick. And thank you at home for watching and tuning in. Consider this your invitation to subscribe to be the very first to know of the next speaker in our Holistic Ambition series. Wishing you a wonderful day. Until next time.